Yes, well, the Israelis and, of course, in a linked way, Washington, as I said, are obsessed with Iran because of its role in the region. Not just its role in Iran, its role in supporting the resistance in Palestine, in Lebanon, supporting the Syrian government, supporting Iraq, supporting Yemen, for example. They're obsessed with Iran, and the Israelis are particularly anxious about it because, after all, they're quite a small regime. They have a disproportionately large military power, but they are still very small. They have no chance at all of attacking Iran by themselves, but they're constantly trying to get the support of the US, that when they talk about attacking Iran, they want assurances from the US that they will be behind them in case there's any retaliation from Iran, because Iran could devastate. And Israel's a small regime. It has, everyone knows where its major facilities are and so on. I think Hassan Nasrallah has pointed that out many times in the media. So the Israelis have this anxiety which makes them more obsessive even than the North Americans. And for example, if you look at when the US withdrew from Afghanistan a couple of years ago, all of the collaborators of the US in the region were extremely anxious. The separatist Kurds that were being used in northeastern Syria, but the Israelis in particular, they were very anxious, and the then Israeli leader at the time flew to Washington undoubtedly to get assurances that the US wasn't going to abandon them, because they have a great fear of being abandoned. And there's another interesting concept that they talk about from time to time, and I've written about it just recently. It's called an Iranian land bridge. You might have heard this expression. An Iranian land bridge has some historical meanings, but one of its current meanings is the Israelis and their North American sponsors are desperate to stop the linking up of Iran with Iraq, with Syria, with Lebanon, with the resistance in Lebanon. And they see it as an existential threat. That is to say, there's a very strong resistance movement on the borders of the occupied Golan, because that is the first step in terms of liberating occupied Palestine, the occupied part of Syria there. It's something they write about, the intelligence-linked media writes about quite a lot. So they're very concerned, and that's why probably the major reason for, I would say, the major reason for the US occupation now of both Iraq and Syria is to try and block the border relations between those two countries, and by doing that also block the access of Iranian forces. It was Qasem Soleimani in 2017 who went immediately down from Deir ez-Zor after the liberation of, well, as Deir ez-Zor was being liberated. I was there at the time in October 2017. It wasn't completely liberated. They were still fighting Daesh in Deir ez-Zor city. Soleimani went down to the border, to Abu Kamal, to take that border crossing. And it's the one border crossing between Syria and Iraq that the resistance forces have held on to ever since then, in the almost 6 years since then. It's been attacked many times from missiles and airstrikes and so on, but the resistance keeps that crossing. Otherwise, the US is maintaining those border crossings in Al-Tanf in the south and in the northeast, where that occupation is. So this is behind the Israeli fear. And it's a real fear, because really the truth is, if the resistance does manage to unify and solidify its presence there on the front line in Lebanon, the front line in Syria, then the Israeli regime faces a real threat. There will be great pressure on them to dismantle their apartheid system. The Israelis already are very divided. There are serious fights between what we could call the liberal Zionists and the openly fascist Zionists. The liberal Zionists are very concerned about the fact that their image has been destroyed by the 6 independent reports that have branded it as an apartheid state. They don't like that. It's very bad for their self-image. They see themselves as Western, they're basically European people, North American people. They see themselves as tolerant and non-racist. They can't live with this. They hate the Netanyahus of the world. They want to change that system. And so I think they will be actually an important force when apartheid Israel is dismantled, and I've written about this recently, that we have to be aware that the liberal Zionists are already agitating for some change in the regime in occupied Palestine. So when we talk about a threat to Israel, yes, of course, there are even liberal Zionists, North American Jewish people, for example, who want to change that regime. Many people want to change that regime. All the hard work is being done by the resistance on the ground in Palestine. All the sacrifices are being made there. But there are many forces that are going to come to play. And there will be some sort of compromise in the end. And the detail of that compromise is a very important thing to look at. And if we have some time, we could talk about that. But I'm just saying the threat to the Israeli entity is very real and very imminent, I think more imminent than many people think.